Today I'm going to show you how to use a router table. We're going to be using one router bit with a bearing, one router bit without, actually two different router bits with a bearing, and then one without a bearing. We're going to use the fence for using one router bit with a bearing and one router bit without a bearing. Now you don't have to use the fence when you're using a router bit with a bottom bearing. And yes, these, even though these appear to be on top, these are all bottom bearing router bits because they hang in the router this way. However, when you use them in the table, they're this way. So this is a bottom bearing router bit. And we don't need the fence if you have a bearing, but we don't have dust collection unless we use the fence. We're also going to be using a flush trim with no fence, and then that's when this is called the start pin, and that's when the start pin comes into play. So let's get into all of that right now. This is a Baidets 35 piece, I believe, router bit set. It's an inexpensive set. And if you're just getting into using a router, I would highly recommend that you buy a set like this before you buy expensive bits. And the reason for that is to see which ones you use the most. And then if you want to drop $50 per se on this roundover bit that, you know, I use quite frequently, then drop $50 on a bit that's going to last you for a long time. These are not of the highest quality. They're good. They'll produce, you know, a good looking profile, as you're going to see in a few minutes. So what we have here is a lot of these have the bottom bearings on them, and then these up here do not. And most of them that do not, well, this one does, but most of them that do not are either going to be for coves or for you know, round noses, dovetails. Then we have this straight bit. This is kind of like a bit that you would use for freehanding in your router, and then some other, just some straight or straight bits. So what we're going to do is we're going to take probably this cove bit right here, and we're going to get it in the router, and then we're going to cut a cove on the inside of the board using the fence with the vacuum. All router tables are going to have these bushings, and what these do is prevent tons of chips from going down into the mechanicals of the router and just down under your table and where you don't really want them. And we have to take this out to put our new bit in, and there's a little lock here in the router, so we're going to drop our bit in, and we don't want to let the bit bottom out in the router. We want to keep it up just a little bit, so I'm just going to snug it a little bit so it'll kind of stay right there. Then I'm going to lock it into place and tighten that bit in there. You want to make sure that the bit, you don't have to over tighten it, but you want to make sure that it's tight. And then we will drop this back in and lock it into place. Now, to use the fence, we do not need the start pin, so we're going to pull that out of the way. We're going to get our fence adjusted, and I would just want to stay about 1 inch away or so, and we're going to cut this cove into about 1 inch inside the wood. When you're adjusting your fence with a router as opposed to a table saw, it doesn't matter if you're slightly crooked one way or slightly crooked the other way. It's just a matter of the distance from the fence to the bit. So that's why you don't see anything in here to make sure that this is completely straight, because it doesn't need to be in most cases. It doesn't matter if you're set up like this, just so long as you're where you want to be when you're coming across that bit. So we're just going to get about 1 inch away, and we're going to lock it into place. Now we need to set our height on our bit. So the router just kind of, when I unlocked it, it just fell down into its own lock. Now we'll adjust it up. We're going to call that good right there. And we're just going to take a piece of pine and we're going to run it through here and cut that cove in it. So I've just got some short pieces of pine here. So when we go up against the fence, we'll come into it. You're always going from the right to the left with your router table facing you, because you want to push the wood into the rotation of the router. It's the same as any saw. So the blade is always cutting into the wood, not away from. If you were to come into it this way, it would literally just try to push the board back. It'll dance around, it'll do all kinds of crazy things, and you won't get good results at all. So you always have to go from right to left in the router table. I've got my vacuum hooked up to my fence for dust collection. It might grab some of this, it might not, because of the fact that we're kind of going to be covering the hole. We're an inch away from the opening in the fence, so we'll have to see how much it actually grabs, but I don't think it's going to be a whole lot. So at any rate, we're set, we're all ready to go. Let's cut this cove. Okay, so there we have it. We have cut a cove in this piece of wood. Fairly simple, fairly straightforward. Now I want to also mention that just like any other saw that you're using, you can experience kickback in a router table. We'll talk about that more in a little bit. If you have something stable to put your workpiece against while you're coming through, you will rarely ever experience any kickback, because this gives you an excellent piece of control over your workpiece. So let's pop this out and let's put a bearing type bit in, and we're going to cut a chamfer. I think we'll put in here a chamfer bit, and then we'll go ahead and cut a chamfer on one side of this, and you can see how that works. I have the chamfer bit in the router, and we have to switch out our bushings to a bigger one. So with this Kreg router table, I ordered, you get 3 bushings with it. I'll put a link to everything in the description that we're using today in case you want to go have a look. But this was an additional purchase above and beyond, and each one of these have a different sized hole in them for different bits that you may use. So we're going to switch over to the 1 3/8, because that is what's going to best fit what we're going to be using here today. So there we have it. Now we need to get our fence adjustment now is a little more critical than it was before. So we're going to have to open our fence up a little bit. These are adjustable so that you can pull them out to wherever you need them to be. Get this out of our way. Now at this point our bit is obviously way too high, so we have to lower this down into more into where we need it to be. And the height of this is just going to determine how much of a chamfer you put on it. So you're going to want to use a sample piece before you just, you know, stick the bit in, think you got it where you want it, and cut a chamfer, because it might be more than you want. If it's less than you want, that's okay, that's no big deal, right? It's the more part that is going to get you. So we're going to go about right there. Now what we're going to do is we are going to use this board that we're going to cut the chamfer on, this side over here, and we're going to set it up here to where the fence and the bearing are pretty close to. So the bearing right now is touching the surface of the wood. I've actually got it lifted up a little bit, and it is also on the fence. Now the bearing is just slightly prominent. I don't know if you can see the board wiggling back and forth, but the bearing is just slightly sticking out further than the fence. So what we're going to do is, now we're all set. The fence is locked into place and we are ready to run this through here. And just like that, we have cut a chamfer on the side of the board. Now the possibilities of bits that you can put in here is endless, what you can do in the bits that are available. I'm going to do a video in the very near future on a lot of these bits and what they do and how they, the profiles that they cut. So, and the different things that you can do with different bits as far as height adjustment and so on and so forth. Alright, let's move on to the next. We're going to take this fence off and we are going to use a flush trim bit, and we're going to use a template, this template right here, and we're going to cut out this Roman cross out of this piece of red oak. This is where you have to be more careful and where that start pin comes into play, because we obviously cannot use the fence cutting this piece out on the router using this template. So let's get our bit over here and get it put in. The bit we're going to be using now is a flush trim bit, and while there are flush trim bits in that Baidets set that I showed you earlier, this is one of those higher quality bits I was talking about. This was a $35 bit or something like that. It came from Crafted Elements. I'm not an affiliate of Crafted Elements, but I'm going to put a link in the description for them to their website. That's where I get the templates. Pretty cool little place. They have a lot of stuff to help you get started in, you know, building templates or using templates for cutting boards and different things like this cross that we're getting ready to cut out. So while I tighten this in here, I also want to say that these router videos all came about from a good friend of mine. Bob asked me to do some router videos, and so that's kind of where all these are coming from. And I just want to say, if there's videos that you would like to see as well, just drop it in the comments that you would, hey, how about a video on this or a video on that. I'll gladly oblige in doing some videos like that to help, just to help people out. I like helping people out. That's the whole reason for this YouTube channel. If I can't help people out, I can help more people with this YouTube channel than I can any other way. So that was the whole reason for doing this in the first place. So if you need help with something, reach out. Okay, I kind of nonchalantly screwed this in here. This is called the start pin. Every router table has a start pin. The start pin is very important when you're going to freehand something through the router like this right here. And the whole reason for that is that the workpiece needs something solid for you to start with before you take it into the router bit. If you just take it into the router bit without it against something solid, then it's going to try to kick back, or more prone to kick back. I had a little kickback the other day. I'm going to pop a video in right now so that you can kind of see what happened right there. Alright, let's get this thing adjusted. And what I want, the nice thing about a flush trim bit like this is is that the cutter is the exact same size as the bearing. So if you're a little bit up on the template with your cutter, it's not going to cut your template. But we don't want to be so high that we stand the chance of riding off. It's what happened to me in my last video, if you watched that, where we made the pocket tray. For some reason or another, my bit raised up on me, so we're going to make sure that that doesn't happen today, and that my router is actually locked into place like it's supposed to be. Now here's the sad part. We have no vacuum. This is going to throw chips everywhere. So I'm going to be wearing chips by the time we're done with this. When you're freehanding something like this, you always want to start on the side grain. You never want to start on the end grain. This being really the only end grain that's here. I mean, this is and this is here and here. So we wouldn't want to start in these areas. You want to make sure that you're either against the start pin or against the bearing. Once you get against the bearing of this router bit, that is just the same as the start pin. So that gives you that stationary support that you need to help prevent this from kicking back or getting away from you. And then of course, always remember we're going from right to left through this whole thing. So when I get started, if I feel like at some point the start pin is going to kind of get in my way, I might pull it out for a minute, put it back in. It just depends. So long as this bearing is against my template, like I say, I don't need that start pin. But if gets an area where, you know, like when I start to get down here, it's going to get tough. I can probably get by it, but it'll get a little tough. In some places here too, we have a little more meat than we really should have. So I'm not going to go right up against the template and make that router bit dig all that out of there at once. I'm just going to nudge some of it off. So it'd be very important that we have that start pin in place to do some of that. And some of this is going to be very hard for me to use that start pin. So I might just go ahead and force that router bit right through that extra wood. All right, let's get started. So we're up against the start pin, and we're just going to ease it in. Okay, let's stop right there for a minute. Now, if you want to, you can like tape your vacuum hose up here and hope that it can suck some in. Now you see that it kind of peeled some wood off. It didn't affect my finished edge. However, you have to be careful of that, and that only happens when I'm asking it to take too much. And the only reason I did that is it just left me with no choice. I couldn't get past it with this hook on the way and get it by, you know, and have the support that I needed. So I just kept it up against the bearing and hogged it through that little bit of material. So let's get around this end right here, and then we'll be coming up the other side. So now we either have a choice. We can run it through this side and push it this way, right? Or we can come over to this side and push it the opposite way, because now we're on the back side of the blade. So we can do this either way. However, I feel better having this workpiece between me and the bit, so we're going to go this way. So now, as you can see, the start pin is in my way. Now at this point in time I have to remove the start pin, but it's okay because I will just keep this router bit bearing against the template, and that will give me my stationary point that I need. Alright, let's do it. My router bit has just done it again, or the router or something. For some reason the bearing has raised up higher than the template, and it caused me some issues. It did this to me last time I used it, and I'm not sure why it's doing this. So it may be time to replace this router that I'm using, because I don't think the adjustment is holding in place. Alright, that completes that. Now, just to show you how messy all that is, I'm covered in it basically, but we've got this one cut out. I did have a couple issues with my blade or my bit I'm just not happy with. I don't know exactly what's going on. The last time I used a template, it did the same thing. I did take some precautions. I thought I took care of a few things, but it did it again. So you want to make sure that your bit, I believe my bit came up out of the collet, so I just tightened it in there way tighter than you really should, but it seemed to hold it in place. So at any rate, we got it cut out. Alright guys, so there we have it. Now to finish the project, we're going to need to do roundovers on it. And we can do that in the router table also, but this is just basically a tutorial to show you how to use the router table and how to use the router table safely. And like I say, that start pin is so very important, or you to be up against this bearing with your template or your pattern. Now the difference between a template and a pattern is not a whole lot. But typically a pattern would be on the bottom side of the workpiece, and you would be using a bottom bearing, wherein a template is on the top side of the workpiece and you're using a bottom bearing. So top bearing, bottom bearing, just depends on which way it's turned. Templates or patterns are most of the times made out of wood, and templates are made out of acrylic. Templates can be made out of wood also. Don't know, it's kind of crazy how all that works, but that's exactly how it works. So at any rate, guys, just a quick video how to use this router table. Like I say, I'll put a link to everything in the description. If you need help with any of your projects or understanding anything that you're doing, feel free to reach out to me. If you enjoyed yourself, click on one of those two videos that are going to pop up next to me. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I would greatly appreciate it if you would consider doing so. And remember to always respect the power of your power tools. We'll see you soon.